Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon video. So today we got some new rules changes and erratas, so let's just go right over it. So starting with the rules change, it is basically an announcement of a banned and restricted list, which is definitely really good because if cards become too problematic or cards are just overpowered and they need to be like banned or limited and toned down so that other cards can really start shining and it doesn't hinder development, then I definitely think that this is good news. And even though it is a little bit early, it's never too early to have a ban and restricted list, especially if something is proven to be too powerful, especially with the time gap between OCG and TCG. So that's just one huge thing to note. So them formulating a ban list definitely is not something that should be a surprise to anyone. But ordinarily, what they're basically stating in this first paragraph is just kind of what this list is, where it's like, oh, you normally can play up to 4 copies of a card in your deck, but with cards being banned or limited, that number changes based on what they allow. So they're just saying that banned cards cannot be included in decks, and then restricted cards allow you to play equal to the number of cards in the parentheses. So in this case, it's 1. So I think that just straight up axing the card to 1 is fine. It definitely hinders the card, but still allows it to be playable in some capacity. I feel like if they were to change it to like 2 or 3 of, then it definitely really wouldn't matter a whole lot because the deck can just formulate around that. But 1 is definitely a lot harder to formulate around. So I definitely think that's totally fine. But this allows them to change it to 2 or 3 for other cards if they need them to be that way. And then we have a note that the banned and restricted card list can change depending on the competitive environment. So that's just one thing to take note of. And then it's stating that these cards will be restricted to 1 as of Thursday, April 1st. So this is not an April Fool's joke. It's just the set that these are releasing in comes out in March. So having the list take in effect the 1st of the next month just only makes sense. So these are the cards that are restricted to 1 of. So they are going to be restricting the Argamon and the parallel version of him, and then they are going to be restricting Hidden Potential Discovered. And then as far as the explanation that they gave, they basically just said that Argamon and Hidden Potential Discovered allow green decks to easily reduce their evolution cost to 0, and then resulting in play patterns that are faster than what were anticipated. So to bring this back in line with the speed of a lot of the other colors, they are going to be restricting those cards to 1 copy per deck. So to kind of like summarize their summary, this just allowed green to just basically digivolve way faster than all of the other colors because you have Argamon, which has Digisorption 3, so you could basically make his evolution cost 0, and then you have Hidden Potential Discovered, which will make whatever Digimon you're digivolving into, as long as you're digivolving from a green Digimon, that evolution cost will be reduced by 5. So you essentially could go into a Mega if you have a good enough board state for literally 2 or 3 memory, and that's just really powerful of a tempo swing. So it's just a huge power swing, and it definitely allows green to go faster into its megas than it normally would. And they are basically just limiting these cards because it's just too fast and it's too oppressive for what green is doing. And a huge part of what green is trying to beat up on the opponent's Digimon. So if they're able to just sit on a Mega faster than the opponent, then they're going to use their Mega to try to beat up basically all of the opponent's Digimon, and then pair that up with Piercing, and then they'll also be dealing damage to them at the same time. And this just allows them to form a lockout strategy to where the opponent really has to play their Digimon in the raising area, and by then they're just slowing down their game plan, and then green is just still going to be able to just gain so much tempo and just be able to outpace the other deck. So this is totally fine that green is getting this nerf, even though we don't have a whole lot of time to play with these cards in the full capacity that Japan has. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing because it definitely makes us play a lot of our decks a lot differently, and our meta is going to end up being a lot more different because of this, and I don't see that as a bad thing. yes, it is a little unfortunate, but like we already knew that Hidden Potential was already a insane card. I am kind of surprised at Argamon considering we still have Blossomon to basically do the exact same thing, but I guess Argamon is just the smarter choice just because he has this additional inheritable ability to just start spamming level 3 green Digimon. So I guess that's fair and totally fine, and I definitely think that even though it does hurt green a little bit, green is still going to be a very competitively viable deck just because their cards are still very, very good and they still have very easy ways to get up into their mega. And yes, while this does hinder them a little bit, it still doesn't completely shut out the capability that they could still see these cards, and it still doesn't hinder the ability for their megas because green is still a very, very powerful color. It's just losing a little bit of its tempo tools that just make it absolutely insane. So while this is, again, a little bit unfortunate, it's totally okay, and I actually really, really like this, even though I am a green player, and this does make me a little bit disappointed. It's just, I already knew how good these cards were, and how oppressive green was going to be, and hopefully this doesn't make green as oppressive, and it makes games a little bit more interesting and a little bit more fair for all of the other colors. And then as far as the other rule change, we have an update to the errata list. So for those who don't know what an errata is basically a card was printed with the improper text, and an errata basically is them trying to fix the text by saying, hey, this is the list of all of the cards with the incorrect text. Here is the actually correct text. And then going forward, if they were to print any future versions of that card, it'll have the fixed version of the text. So that's what an errata is, and we got a new errata in the form of a delicate plan. So even though we don't have 1.5 out yet, they were spoiling all of the cards for 1.5, so they realized that there was a translation error in a delicate plan. And the card basically read where one of your Digimon gains the ability where this Digimon doesn't activate the security effect of any cards that's checked. So this is really, really powerful because it turns off security Digimon, it turns off tamers, just anything that's using security as a whole, this ability turns off, and that's not the intended use of the card. And the card now will read where one of your Digimon gains the ability where it just turns off the security effect of option cards if they're checked. So that's the big change, and it was just a translation error. And then it also is stating that in the premium pack set, this version of the card will include the fixed text. So that's where you could find the card with the proper text. Otherwise, you're just going to have to keep in mind that it's only for option cards. And then the only other errata that we had, which we don't really see any changes to, was the Taichi V-Tamer, where he has just a small wording error where it says activate draw 1, and now it's going to say trigger draw 1, and then this version will be fixed in version 1.5 booster boxes because it is also going to be a promo in that box topper pack as well. So that is where the fix to that card is going to be. This one isn't necessarily new, but it's still nice to go over where it's going to be fixed in. But this is definitely a new one, and it is just a small translation error that they are just clarifying and fixing. So erratas aren't anything too new or special if you're used to playing Japanese card games, so we could expect to see more in the future, but hopefully they do a good enough job where they really start to limit the amount of erratas that we are getting, and they do a good job to properly translate them as best as they possibly can, which so far it definitely looks like they are doing a decent job at. It's just expected to see a couple of things slip through the cracks here and there. But as far as all of the overall news and changes, I definitely am really, really interested in seeing how the English meta is going to develop with us being behind, and we are still getting all of the same changes that they are getting. It's just going to influence how we are actually playing our meta. So we're going to be playing a meta where it's completely different than Japan's because Japan's meta didn't have this change and ours does. So I'm really excited to see what people can do and where decks go. Obviously, we still know what a lot of the other hyper-powerful decks and hyper-powerful cards are going to be. It's just now that we know that they are willing to limit the amount of those cards that are going to be in some decks, definitely can change the way that the market is going to react, and it's definitely going to change the way that the meta is going to develop. But so far, I don't think that this should really upset anyone, considering these cards were very, very low rarity. I think like one was a common, one was an uncommon. So value-wise, it's not really hurting the overall value of the set. It's just a little bit unfortunate that green is losing some of its hyper-powerful tempo tools, but it still has so many really good, powerful options and tools that it could utilize that I don't necessarily think that's that big of a deal, even though it does hinder certain decks quite a lot. But yeah, that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content. And I'll see you in the next video.